Good morning. Today is the 27th of February and it's time for yet another not particularly interesting, very vague and probably quite boring vlog. We're going to follow up on something that we talked about earlier this month, although for most of you it'll be next month because these are recorded about 3 weeks in advance. And if you're a channel member on the Road 45 and set Toledo Mark 4 membership tiers, then you'll see this around the same time it's recorded. Other than that, you'll see this a few weeks later. So a lot of people at the moment are very much into videos and other media about the ultra low emission and clean air zones that are popping up all over the place. Not just in London, there's one actually coming into force today as I'm recording this in Sheffield. Now, the Sheffield one, the Bath one and the Portsmouth one, they only refer to taxis and some other commercial vehicles at the moment. They're not for private cars, but it's going to be the case, I think, that those will become for private cars in the future. The Birmingham one, the Bristol one, the London one, for certain, are the private cars right now. And we talked earlier this month, we did a recording, about the fact that one of my friends who has an MGZR actually got a fine for the clean air zone in Birmingham, even though his car was compliant, because all he'd done is change from his private plate onto the original car's plate. That's all he'd done, and he subsequently actually sold the car, and so when he got the thing through the door, he couldn't do anything about it. It was all a bit strange. Let's open this. There we go, it's a bit more light in there. The thing I've been looking at though ever since this, and I found this out during the course of my research for the last video, is that the evasion rate in Birmingham is absolutely massive. It's something like up to 30,000 people a month who are being fined for taking a non-compliant car into the centre of Birmingham and not paying the daily charge of £8, are just refusing to pay, or they're not even aware of what it is. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah, about 30,000 people a month. The number of fines being issued, it ranges from sort of like 45 to 60,000 fines at the moment. Obviously there are people who pay, and I think there's actually reported to be something like 50 to 60 million pounds a year that Birmingham Council are going to be receiving from money related to the clean air zone charge, which is a lot of money. The thing is that the Birmingham Council leader, I forget his name right now, and the Mayor of London and all their friends around the country who keep introducing these clean air and ultra low emission zones, they're not really friends of the channel. If they didn't have these ultra low emission and clean air zones, we'd be talking about diesels on this channel. But because they have them, we can't talk about them because they pretty much say that we can't. For context, the £8 a day charge in Birmingham is for driving within the A4540 middleway, but not on the road itself. It's a very simple zone to explain. It's probably the simplest zone to explain, I think, in the country. It's actually more simple than the London one is at the moment. The one that's in Bristol is incredibly complicated to explain, and I think what I'm going to have to do is just go to Bristol at one point. I've got a friend who lives there, who actually is involved in some of the political scene there. He actually doesn't drive, which is really interesting actually. And I've said to him I'll go down there at some point and we'll have a little drive around the boundary of the zone. We might have to go in a car that's compliant. Ironically, all the cars we have at the moment are compliant. This one, despite being a 2003 Road 45 V6, built in Birmingham, is actually compliant with the zone, which is absolutely insane, isn't it? and then you can have something like a 2014 Chevy Cruze with an engine we can't discuss, but I used to own. It was a 2014 1.7, and that's not compliant, despite the fact that it was, I think, £30 a year to tax, and was under 120 grams per tonne of CO2. But yeah, that one's not compliant. I think a friend of mine still owns that car, and this one is, which is one of the biggest things about the zones that a lot of us just don't really understand, being incentivised to drive cars like that, and then being told, in my case, less than, I think, 3 years after that car was registered March 2014, I think it was, in 14 plate, being told that, oh, our cars are polluting and we're going to have to actually get rid of them or pay the fine. No, sorry, the fine, the charge or fee. The fines are something separate. So reading the Birmingham Mail online, which has been quite a fascinating experience for me over the last week or so since I recorded that video about my friend's LXXXIV and non-plate change, there's so many articles in there talking about the evasion rate, I think, between April and October 2022. The number of fines that have been issued, I think something like 40% of them had actually been paid. A lot of people are just not paying the fines. They're either unaware of the fact that their cars aren't compliant, and we will be covering in a second, just in case you don't know what the rules are for how your car can be compliant, or they just don't want to pay them. They're obviously people who are driving around in their forbidden fuel cars or really old cars, sort of before the year 2001, and they're just kind of saying, we don't care about your fines, we're just not going to pay. I think the Birmingham Council themselves, judging by what I've read in the articles, have actually said that they're not going to pursue but 1 in 20 of the fines that are unpaid. They're just not going to bother. A lot of people have been taken to court over these fines, and they've been let off them because of technicalities or things like that. It's absolutely insane. Why bother setting up a system when you have a more than 50% non-compliance rate? Why? I mean, a lot of people do pay. I think it's about 40% of people do pay within the first 14 days if they get a fine, because you get a reduction. I think it's £60. Normally is a fine of right to 120 if you don't pay within that amount of time. But the amount of wastage that's happening, that people have to be pursued for not paying these fines, but just don't want to pay them, when they could be doing something else. Sure enough, they're scheduled to get 50 or 60 million pounds from the fees and the fines for the Clean Air Zone in Birmingham. But that's kind of offset by the fact you set it all up and administer it and issue penalty notices to people who haven't paid and all this kind of thing. It's utter total madness. And the zone's quite small at the moment, but it's going to get a bit worse, because in June 2021, when that zone was set up, they were told as citizens of Birmingham, if they live within the middleway, that they didn't have to pay the charge. If you had a non-compliant car, you didn't have to pay for 2 years. But it's been reported again in the Birmingham Mail. I mean, I really should get multiple sources for this, but I've just been enjoying reading the Birmingham Mail recently, that if you live in that zone, your exemption is going to go in May. So if you want to move your non-compliant car anywhere in there, if you just leave it at home outside your house and don't move it, it's not going to apply. But if you want to go anywhere in a non-compliant car, or van I should say, then it's going to be £8 a day. Just very quickly, let's go over the rules for compliance. Now, on one of the articles that I read on Birmingham Mail, they actually list some more complicated exemptions, and there are a number of exemptions. If you're visiting, I think, hospital for a certain reason, if you're going to a place of worship, some people, in terms of community transport, there are a number of technical exemptions, but the main exemptions for it are that you have a petrol car like this one that's Euro 4 or later. Euro 4 cars generally came in from December 2005, 1st January 2006 was when all petrol cars solid by the European Union, had to be Euro 4 emissions compliant. Now, tons of them made before that were actually Euro 4 anyway. The reason why this Rover's actually Euro 4 up to 2003 is actually quite complicated. The MG Rover compliance is something that's not quite as simple as just it's a Euro 4 engine. There's a bit more to it than that, but it's really not worth getting into. It's not very interesting, really. But yeah, cars from about 2001, quite a few of them are exempt if they've got a petrol engine. And it's just a case of going on a government checker, which actually covers quite a few of the zones, including the Sheffield one now, if you are a taxi driver and you'll need to know about that. The London one's a completely different checker, that's on the TfL website, but there's a gov.uk checker. You can go on there and it's for a number of the zones we talked about in the previous video. You can have a look and see if your car's compliant, particularly if it's kind of grey between 2001 and 2005 is where you need to check it. This one is, which is great, so I can go to Birmingham if I want to, and visit Longbridge and other places. So Longbridge is way outside the zone, to be honest. Then we talk about the forbidden fuel, diesel engines. We don't talk about on the channel, apart from making these videos because they are for public information purposes. If you have one of these cars and it has an engine using heavy oil, the standards are not Euro 4, they're Euro 6. Euro 6 generally came in September 2015. So you'd be looking at a car with a 65 plate or later. There are obviously some that were made before that, which are, Euro 6. But the Chevy Cruze I used to have is not. It is not a Euro 6 compliant engine. The old Circle L engine, the 1.7, that was used for many, many years in General Motors products, never was Euro 6. And so, yeah, if my friend who owns it actually we were to go anywhere near these clean air zones, you'd have to pay the charge. Madness. One of the main things you can do to avoid this is actually buy a really old car. Doesn't matter what engine it's got. If your car is registered before January 1983 and you go through some steps, I think, to make sure that you are MOT exempt and this sort of stuff. I think even those really old cars, historic ones, might be congestion charging London exempt as well. I can't remember now, I always forget about that one. But certainly if you've got an 82 or earlier, it doesn't matter. Just go into the ultra emission zone and clean air zone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Obviously, I would definitely recommend you get an MOT on your car if you want to use it. That's just a basic thing. I mean, you don't have to get one. I'd recommend getting one. So that's, again, it's a really, really weird thing. Obviously, Alex Max's assets, all her cars are 1979 or older, so she could go into whatever she wanted. It wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference, which is a really strange thing. But yeah, those are the general rules. So the evasion rates are quite high. Maybe it's just people who drive really old cars in Birmingham, maybe some old Rovers and MGs, and just sort of saying that we don't really care. You can stuff your clean air zone charge. But let me know in the comment section below what you think about this. Thank you ever so much indeed for watching. Sorry about this terrible road surface. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video below, and we shall see you again soon for more incredibly boring politics. Lloyd Consulting stickers, t-shirts and mugs are available by clicking the link to the Google form in the video description below.